9 languages, from the mouth of an 11-year-old girl. The laughter came instantly. Not the laughter of joy, but the laughter of a predator when it sees its prey wander into the open. It echoed across a Manhattan penthouse. White marble, floors gleaming cold. Italian leather chairs lined in black, floor-to-ceiling windows staring down at Central Park as a reminder. Here, power didn't flow from justice. It flowed from money. The man laughing was Khalid Rahman, 52, an Arab shipping magnate worth $4.1 billion. He was proud of having built what he called an empire of the select. And by select, he meant the rich, the white, the well-connected. Everything Amara Johnson, an 11-year-old black girl, daughter of a cleaning lady, would never be. Amara stood there, small, thin, clutching a worn public school backpack, its seams splitting like open wounds. Beside her, her mother, Grace Johnson, 42, still wore her faded gray janitor's uniform, gripping a wet mop bucket with hands that trembled. She had never meant to bring her daughter here. But the shift had run long, childcare had fallen through, and desperation had made the choice for her. Now, that choice felt like a crime. 9 languages? Khalid repeated, his voice dripping with mockery. His eyes slid over Amara's braids as if even her hair was a lie. Then he laughed louder. This child is 11 years old, barely speaks English properly, and claims to speak 9 languages? Grace, maybe you should take her to a psychiatrist. Instead of dragging her into my office. Grace bowed her head. For 5 years she had endured this kind of humiliation to keep food on the table, but never had the cruelty cut this close to her own blood. Amara, apologize, she whispered, voice shaking, not just with fear of losing her job, but fear of losing the only lifeline her family had. But Amara did not apologize. Her large, dark eyes, clear and steady, rose to meet his. She already knew the world branded her with 3 labels: black, poor, daughter of a cleaning lady. She also knew each label was an excuse for men like Khalid to laugh. But this time, she had come prepared. English, Spanish, French, German, Arabic, Mandarin, Russian, Italian, Portuguese. The words fell one after another, sharp and exact. The voice of a child, yes, but each syllable cut clean, like glass against stone. The laughter in the room stumbled for half a beat. Khalid's smile faltered, then twisted back into a sneer. Parlor trick. Reciting names means nothing. That girl hasn't even read a full book in English. Grace reached to pull her daughter back, but Amara touched her arm gently, whispering, Mom, I'm okay. No tremor in her hand. No shadow of fear in her voice. Only the quiet resolve of an 11-year-old who refused to bow. This is not a story about precocious intelligence. This is a story about truth buried beneath glass towers and $1,000 suits. Amara wasn't just defying a laugh. She was defying a system designed to erase her before she could even begin. And this moment, this single declaration, was the first warning shot fired at a structure built on contempt for the minds of the powerless. Before we go further, pause for a second. If you believe intelligence has no color, no zip code, no last name, then hit like and subscribe right now. Because what you are about to hear in the next few minutes will change the way you see power, intellect, and justice. The Manhattan penthouse gleamed, but inside, the contrast was as sharp as a cut. On one side, $15,000 Italian leather chairs, a marble desk heavy as stone, gold-plated calligraphy frames. On the other, a faded plastic bucket, a mop still reeking of bleach. Grace Johnson, 42, stood frozen, as if the weight of that bucket chained her life to the cold marble floor. For 5 years, she had been an invisible shadow in this office. No one used her name, only the cleaning lady. She had learned to stay silent through crude jokes about black maids. She had forced a smile when interns half her age tossed rags at her feet and ordered her to clean again. She knew one reaction could cost her a pink slip, and that slip meant the end of survival for her entire family. In silence, Grace had swallowed her humiliation to raise 2 children. But today, when Khalid's laughter fell directly on her daughter's head, the shame became a knife twisting inside her. Amara was only 11. Too small for this space. The chairs were too tall, the windows too wide, the glass walls threatening to swallow her thin frame. Yet in those bright, dark eyes, there was no trembling. She already understood the script the world had written for her. Stay silent, stay humble, take less. The daughter of a janitor was meant to sweep up after the powerful, never sit among them. And Khalid Rahman, 52, was living proof of that script. Born into a middle-class Gulf family, he had migrated to America at 16 and once tasted poverty. But instead of remembering, he buried it, wrapped himself in the armor of arrogance. He called it business toughness. In truth, it was a mask for contempt. The richer Khalid grew, the more he believed his wealth was proof of intellect. And intellect, in his view, could never come from the Bronx, from a public library, or from an 11-year-old girl with a fraying backpack. In Khalid's world, power was measured by polished shoes and bank balances. He slapped backs with white CEOs and referred to immigrant employees as them, never us. He labeled people the way he labeled shipping containers: nationality, skin color, class. Those labels decided who sat in the boardroom and who scrubbed the floor after the meeting ended. That was why his laughter wasn't just aimed at Amara. It was the laughter of an entire system, a system that knew how to preserve power by making children like Amara invisible. But Amara was not invisible. For 3 years, while her classmates played video games or waited for free lunch tickets, she spent afternoons in the Bronx Public Library. Between the smell of old paper and the glow of weak yellow lamps, she studied French words, Chinese characters, and Russian structures. She downloaded free courses and sat for hours at the library's aging computers. Some nights her stomach was empty, but her mind was full of syllables from around the world. People used to say, "If you want to hide a treasure, put it in a public library. No one will look." Amara looked, and she turned it into a weapon. Across from her, Khalid still saw only a thin little girl. He did not see the nights Grace worked a second shift, leaving her daughter in the library until the guard shut the lights. He did not see how Amara used languages to lay bricks for a bridge out of the Bronx, one word at a time. He only saw a child, and that was his first mistake. In that polished room, every detail was a symbol. The gold watch on Khalid's wrist flashing with reflected light, while the elastic band holding Amara's hair was frayed to the point of breaking. But if the gold watch only measured time, that worn hair tie measured resistance, day after day of defiance against destiny. That was the portrait of inequality, one side flaunting power, the other side carrying silent intellect. And in that moment, the world did not yet know that it was the silent intellect that would prove the most explosive force. This was not just the story of a family inside a luxurious office. It was a cross-section of an entire society, where opportunity is stripped from children simply because they were born in the wrong place. "All right, little one," Khalid said, voice dripping honey but eyes burning with amusement. "If you really speak 9 languages, prove it. This is your chance." He leaned back, arms folded across his chest, like a judge who already knew the verdict. Amara drew a deep breath. The room stretched wide, ceilings soaring, oversized furniture dwarfing her frame. Yet her voice did not tremble. It cut through the silence, clear and steady.
Al-Hakika la tatiyaj ila idin.
The truth needs no permission. The classical Arabic rolled through the luxurious penthouse. It wasn't tourist chatter or textbook dialogue, but a complex grammatical construction, pronounced with such precision that Khalid froze for half a second. The laughter vanished. Silence dropped like a hammer. Grace's eyes widened, not even understanding what her daughter had said. Khalid leaned forward, narrowing his gaze. Where did you learn that? Amara gripped the strap of her backpack, lips curving slightly. At the Bronx Public Library, sir. They have free classes every afternoon. Short words, but each one was a slap across his face. Khalid shot up from his chair. Parrot tricks, memorized nonsense, a phrase means nothing. But Amara did not argue. Quietly, she unzipped her backpack and pulled out a thick folder. Worn pages, but neatly stacked. She placed them on the marble desk. Khalid snatched them up, ready to toss them aside, until his eyes stopped at the seals. Certificates of language proficiency from Columbia University. Verification letters from the New York City Language Center. Transcripts from advanced online translation courses. All legitimate. All signed and stamped. Khalid muttered, "Impossible." But his eyes flickered faster, betraying doubt. And Amara was not done. She produced an old tablet, screen cracked in the corner, and launched a video call. A woman's face appeared. Professor Tran, linguistics lecturer at Peking University. Amara spoke softly yet firmly in Mandarin. "Professor, could you confirm my performance for Mr. Rahman?" The conversation flowed rapidly, naturally, and complexly. Khalid understood none of it, but he could hear rhythm, grammar, the ease of fluency. Finally, the professor switched to English. "Mr. Rahman, Amara is the most gifted student I have taught in 15 years, a true language prodigy." The screen went black. The room held its breath. Khalid swallowed hard. "No, impossible, she's 11. Behind him, Grace clutched her mop bucket with trembling hands, unsure if she was dreaming. Her daughter, the girl she had left at the library during late-night shifts, was dismantling a billionaire with nothing but words. "You could be faking this," Khalid growled, scrambling for control. "Fake certificates, fake contacts." Amara cut him off, her calmness sharper than any accusation. "Mr. Rahman, I didn't just study languages. I studied your contracts. And I found translation errors that have cost you tens of millions." Khalid went pale. His heart lurched. Recent negotiations. Yes, there had been confusion. He had blamed weak signals and difficult partners. Never once had he considered his own words the problem. Amara pulled another sheaf of papers from her bag. Detailed analyses, mistranslations in the Middle Eastern contract, errors in Japanese, and misused German terminology. Each mistake is highlighted in red, explained line by line. Khalid's hands shook as he turned the pages. This was no child's trick. This was an indictment. Grace's gaze flickered between her daughter and her employer. She had never seen Khalid like this, face drained, lips dry, eyes darting. This was a man who had screamed at seasoned CEOs, who had torn up million-dollar contracts in fury. Yet now he stood frozen before an 11-year-old girl. And as Amara quietly folded her backpack closed, it was clear this was only the beginning. In that moment, the balance of power flipped. A billionaire trembled before evidence laid out by tiny hands, and the room understood. It wasn't money, or titles that carried weight. It was the truth. Khalid forced a breath, trying to recover the arrogance that usually shielded him. He set the folder down on the marble desk, stretching his lips into a crooked smile. "Impressive, little one. But a few papers and memorized lines don't make truth. This is theater, and I don't bend to an 11-year-old child." He spoke, but his voice betrayed the tremor beneath. Amara didn't respond right away. Instead, she bent down to her backpack and pulled out a small black device. She placed it on the marble desk. A recorder. Grace froze. Khalid frowned. "Mr. Rahman," Amara said, her voice soft but every word sharp. "Before you dismiss me, you may want to hear this." Her tiny finger pressed play. The room filled with a voice. His own voice. Khalid's stomach turned at the sound. "These black Americans are all the same. Lazy, uneducated, and always blaming others for their failures. That's why I only allow Arabs and whites to hold important positions." The recording ended with a mocking chuckle. Silence consumed the penthouse. Grace dropped her mop. The bucket tipped, water spreading across the marble floor like blood. She stared at her daughter in disbelief. Khalid's face went ashen. "Where did you get that?" he stammered. "In the elevator last week," Amara replied. "You were speaking to your vice president. You didn't notice I was in the corner." Khalid shot up, face burning red. "That's illegal. You had no right." Amara cut in, voice steady, almost legalistic. "New York is a one-party consent state. I was part of the conversation. I consented to record. Entirely legal. And since it documents systemic racial discrimination, I'm certain the Department of Labor will find it compelling." The childish tone made the blade cut deeper. Khalid collapsed back into his chair. He knew the stakes. One recording could trigger a federal investigation, lawsuits worth millions, the collapse of his career. Grace covered her mouth as tears slipped free. Never had she seen someone as powerful as Khalid cornered by her own daughter. But Amara wasn't finished. She pulled another stack of papers, thinner this time. "This," she said evenly, "is a list of international contracts your company has lost in the past 3 years, with linguistic causes analyzed, all based on public documents, press releases, annual reports, and English translations. Every single one shows systemic errors, proof you lack internal language expertise." Khalid flipped through the pages. Names jumped out. Japanese firms, German conglomerates, Middle Eastern funds. Each contract marked in red with a fatal flaw. Mistranslations, terminology errors, cultural misunderstandings. Each one was a bullet shattering his pride. "These mistakes," Amara continued, "aren't random. They repeat, and they match the very policy you admitted. Refusing to hire black professionals, refusing to recruit minority linguists. The result? Tens of millions lost. Maybe hundreds." Khalid leaned forward, sweat glistening across his brow. In his head, numbers collided. Broken contracts, suspicious shareholders, headlines ready to devour him. 30 years of empire could crumble, toppled by an 11-year-old girl with a recorder and a few sheets of paper. Grace stepped forward, wanting to protect her daughter, but Amara lifted a hand. "It's all right, Mom. This is the moment to speak." She locked eyes with Khalid. "You believed the daughter of a cleaning lady was invisible. But you forgot one truth. The invisible are the ones who see what the powerful try to hide." The words landed like a gavel. Not a child's protest. An indictment. Khalid's lips trembled. He wanted to shout, to threaten, to claw back control. But in Amara's gaze, there was no fear. Only the cold certainty of someone holding the truth. In that gilded penthouse, bathed in golden light, a billionaire had become the accused, not in federal court, but before an 11-year-old armed with a recorder. And what terrified him most wasn't the tape. It was her eyes. The eyes of justice, still alive before the system could strangle it. The air inside the office grew heavy, suffocating like oxygen had been drained. Khalid Rahman slumped into his $15,000 Italian leather chair, fingers trembling against the marble desk. He had signed billion-dollar contracts without blinking. But now, the sight of a small black recorder was enough to send his heart racing. Across from him, Amara Johnson, 11 years old, didn't even reach the height of his desk, yet her voice carried unshakable weight. "Mr. Rahman," she said, "I didn't come here to beg. I came here to give you a choice." Grace broke down in tears. "Amara, please." Don't. But the girl shook her head gently. Mom, I have to. This isn't just for us. This is for everyone who's been treated the way you have. Khalid swallowed, forcing a weak smile. And what is it you want? Amara unzipped her backpack, pulled out another stack of papers, and laid them on the desk. Typed clearly at the top, agreement contract. She spoke slowly, deliberately. I want 3 things. 1. My mother, Grace Johnson, to be promoted to facility supervisor with fair pay and benefits, $80,000 a year. 2. You will establish a scholarship fund for children from Black and immigrant communities, so that kids like me have the same opportunities your children do. It will be called the Young Talent Program. And 3. I will become a junior language consultant for your company, not for money, but because your firm is losing millions from linguistic mistakes. I will fix them, Khalid scoffed, clawing for power. You're an 11-year-old child. You think a billion-dollar company will hire you as a consultant? Amara did not blink. She placed a second recorder next to the first. You will sign, or tomorrow both recordings will reach the press, the Department of Labor, and the Attorney General's office. I've scheduled an automatic release. You have 4 minutes left. A shiver ran down Khalid's spine. He knew he was cornered, not by a rival CEO, not by a corporate giant, but by a girl whose eyes still carried traces of childhood yet cut like knives. His hand reached for the engraved gold pen, shaking violently. The moment ink touched paper, the balance of power cracked. Grace could hardly breathe. She stared at the looping signature, the same flourish that once inspired fear across thousands of employees, now forced onto the page by her own daughter. This is blackmail, Khalid muttered, gasping. No, sir, Amara replied calmly. This is justice. You've profited from an unjust system long enough. Now it's time to pay the price. The news spread like gasoline meeting fire. Within days, the New York Times ran an editorial. From Bronx Library to Billionaire's office. The story of an 11-year-old who toppled arrogance with intellect. Television crews swarmed. Images of Amara, in her public school uniform, worn backpack still strapped to her shoulders, flooded screens across America. And Khalid? He was dragged into the open. One morning outside the company headquarters, microphones were shoved into his face. No smile, no swagger, only a hoarse, heavy voice. Today I am announcing a new scholarship program for the community. And I want to admit that I was wrong. Behind him, Amara stood beside her mother. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She stood straight, eyes steady, a living witness to truth. A reporter shouted, Mr. Rahman, is this just a stunt to save your reputation? Khalid hesitated, then spoke words that froze the crowd. No, this isn't about saving face. This is about saving myself from the monster power had turned me into. It didn't erase his sins, but it marked a reversal. The man who once mocked now bowed before an 11-year-old girl. In the days that followed, the gleaming office changed. The gold-plated calligraphy frames came down, replaced with portraits of children from the Bronx, Harlem, Queens, the neighborhoods once dismissed as margins. The Italian leather throne was gone. The boardroom chairs were rearranged in a circle, so everyone sat on equal ground. And at the center of it all stood Amara Johnson, the small girl who had become a symbol. This was no longer a private game of power in a gilded office. This was a public reversal, where a billion-dollar empire was forced to bow to the intellect and truth of an 11-year-old child. The mirrored glass of corporate headquarters reflected a scene it had never known. Children in public school uniforms, crowding through the grand lobby, once reserved only for leather shoes and $1,000 suits. No champagne, no ribbon cutting, just laughter and curious eyes. In the center stood a new plaque. Young Talent Program. Opportunity for every child. Signed, Khalid Rahman. Khalid lingered nearby, silent. He had spent decades staring at profit charts and market graphs. But today, for the first time, he was staring at something else. The light in children's eyes. A light no amount of money could buy, yet one so easily extinguished when opportunity was stolen. Across the hall, Grace Johnson walked tall. No mop bucket in hand, no faded gray uniform. Instead, a deep blue suit hugged the posture of a woman who had bowed for too long but now stood straight. On her chest, a new nameplate, Facility Supervisor. Colleagues glanced as she passed. Some averted their eyes. Others nodded. But none dared laugh anymore. And Amara? She sat at the boardroom table, her legs still too short to reach the floor. Her frayed backpack rested by her chair, but before her lay million-dollar contracts, the latest with Japanese partners, drafted by the company's translation team. With a child's voice still high-pitched but unwavering, she read, underlined, errors, corrected terms, and translated in real time. Around her, directors bent their heads, scribbling notes. An 11-year-old had become the key to saving a corporation from hundreds of millions in losses. No one laughed now. The change rippled far beyond one office. That same day, the Washington Post front-page headline read, "A Bronx child forces a billionaire to bow, and forces a system to reckon with itself." The article didn't glorify Khalid. It celebrated the moment justice flared from the least expected corner. In Bronx classrooms, teachers heard students buzzing, "If Amara can do it, why can't we?" In diners and corner stores, people whispered over the leaked recording of racial contempt. Finally, someone dared to call it out. Amara did not become a symbol because of the press. She became one because of the way she walked. On her first day touring the building with her mother, she didn't boast. She didn't smile smugly. She stopped at the bulletin board where a fresh notice was pinned. All employees may anonymously report discrimination. No retaliation permitted. Signed, Amara Johnson, Junior Language Consultant. An 11-year-old had written into policy what a billion-dollar empire had never thought to enforce. Khalid approached her quietly. Once, he had mocked her as a joke, a burden, an excuse to humiliate her mother. Now, when she looked up, he saw, in her eyes, a reflection of his own younger self. Not an enemy, but a reminder. "Amara," he whispered, "you've changed this company." She shook her head. "No, sir. I only did what anyone could do, if someone listened." The glass walls were still tall, the leather still soft, but a crack had formed. Not one that gold or marble could conceal. A crack carved by truth. And through it, light had begun to seep. The story of Amara Johnson was never just about one family. It was proof that justice can begin with the youngest voice. A child. A borrowed book from a public library. A cheap recorder. Enough to shake an empire. And if an 11-year-old girl could force a billionaire to bow to truth, how long will you stay silent in the face of injustice? The penthouse lights still gleam. The Italian chairs remain. But something irreversible has shifted. The balance of power. No longer the laughter of the rich mocking the poor, but the voice of truth carried by a child. This story is not just about a family. It is living evidence that injustice thrives in the most polished spaces, and that justice can begin in the least expected ones. So what about you? When you face injustice, will you stay silent, or will you speak? Leave your thoughts below. And if you believe truth deserves to be exposed, don't forget to share this story so more people can see it, and subscribe to Toch Story, where the truth is never hidden.